Hey guys, thanks for joining me in this last part of the editorial. What we're going to do now is just going to do a couple of tweaks. We're going to finalize the image by fixing some things about the lips, a couple things about the eyes, some strays, touch up the color a little bit. We're going to show you a couple different techniques. Every image is going to be different, so these numbers and these techniques may not always be necessary for your image. They may not always necessarily work for your image, but at least you get a little foundation on what I use to make some images look as good as they do, despite what we start with. And I'm going to show you real quick. If you haven't watched the first two parts of the tutorial, I suggest you do. You'll understand better how we got to where we are now. I'm going to show you right now. I'm going to zoom in, Command and the plus sign on the keyboard. I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to show you how much we have done to the image. We'll just kind of zoom in about this area. And this, you can see the texture and the pores are still very visible, but it's very smooth. I'm going to show you what we started with. That's what we started with. So you can see that the texture in the image, it still exists, but without all the well, the pimples and the bad skin, basically. That's why this image is so good to use as practice. The link for this image, this is not my image, so you know, although I am a photographer, I didn't take this, but it is available online for free for retouching practicing if you want to follow along with this picture, or if you just want to use it to do your own thing. But I thought it'd be a great image to show you. There's your before. This is what we have. And just so you know, we've done this so far with absolutely no commercial plug-in or filter. Alright, so let's pick a couple spots that we could do. One thing that I do like to use is a help layer. You can see here we've done a couple different things, and again, this is all explained in the first two videos, so if you don't know how we got here, you're going to be a little lost, so I definitely suggest that you watch the first two. What we're going to do is add to this help layer, and a couple things we could do. We're going to hide this last black and white adjustment layer. A couple things I like to do, maybe even earlier on, depending on how bad the image is and how many things you really want to fix, is use a guide, so to speak, a map of what really we're going to be fixing. So it's simple enough. We'll pick the brush tool, make the new layer, make the brush really small, and just pick a color that you're going to notice right away against an image, say red in this case. And what we're going to do is we're just basically going to circle a couple of spots on the image and come back to them. That's just going to help me identify things that I want to address in the image later. And here's a couple things that we're going to do with the eyes. And again, the redness in the eyes we're going to touch up. Some color. I'm going to show you a couple different things that we could do in there. And maybe we're going to touch up here a little bit. A little dryness in the lips there. We did do a little dodging and burning, so we'll just clean that up a little bit, highlight it even a little bit more. I'm going to touch up the hue a little bit in the cheek. I'll show you how to do that. And maybe just a couple strays and flyaways. And we're only working with the face. As you can see in this particular practice image, the hair could really use a lot of work. But it's going to be a lot more work than I'm willing to do for a practice image. So quite honestly, if I was shooting this, I would have called the hairstylist on set and had him or her fix this. Comb through would have really saved a lot of post time. And I mentioned this in one of the earlier videos, is the better your makeup and hairstylist, and of course your model, the better they all are, the less time you're going to spend in post. I can guarantee you that. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to lock this layer, and this layer is just really going to be a guide for us so we know what kind of things we're going to be addressing. Okay, so we could just really, well, actually let's unlock that. I'm just going to get the opacity out of the way, and there we go. Alright, so basically now I know a couple things that I'm going to address, and again, because it is in the help layer, it's not going to affect anything beneath it or above it. All right. Okay, now one thing that I mentioned in one of my previous videos is I'm not a big fan of deleting layers. You could flatten it if you like, but I honestly like keeping the layers. Hard drives honestly aren't that expensive, and although these files can get rather large, depending on how many layers, you know what, I'd rather just have the ability to be able to change it later than have it flattened and have to start all over again, that's for sure. So one thing I do is merge all the layers into one smart layer, and that gives you the ability to do a couple of things. That gives you the ability to uh, keep the layers for later editing and reduce the file size. In this particular case, this image as it stands is 327 megs. If we were going to save it, it's 327 megs on the hard drive, and as you know, these files can get pretty big. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to select a couple of the layers and we're going to merge them into smart layers. So what I'll do is select one of the groups. In this case, we're going to select the retouch group, hold the shift key, and select up to the point where in this case is the dodge and burn. Now this works with any image. I'm using obviously this as an example to show you what we're doing. Now so you know the image itself is 327 megs uncompressed right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the three layers in this case, control, click on any one of the layers, and you're going to show this pop-up drop-down box rather, and we're going to convert to smart objects. It's going to take a couple seconds here, hang on. Okay, now that it's merged the image into one smart layer, you could see that the file size also dropped. Now you didn't lose any of the layer capabilities. If you want to double click the image, what it's going to do, it's going to take a couple seconds, and now it opens up in a different document. Now you do have still the capability to make edits to that particular smart layer in a different document, and whatever changes you make here, they reflect in the original smart layer that you are working on from the file that we just merged. Now we didn't make any changes, so obviously we don't want to save it. Alright, so here we go. Alright, one of the things that was bothering me about this image was, if you could see here, the lips. Let me hide the help layer for a second here. The lips. We're going to use the healing brush tool to get rid of some of this dryness. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit the new layer icon. I'm going to call this lips. I'm going to go over to the healing brush tool. We're going to select the brush palette up here, but we're going to change it. You can see I've already started it. You could change the dimensions of each of the brushes and the rotation and an angle and all sorts of things about it just by clicking on here, and this will show the drop down box. And what we're going to do is similar to what we were doing earlier in the previous video. If you haven't watched that, go ahead and spend some time and watch that. So we're going to make a smaller brush so it doesn't pick up everything about the round brush. When we heal, the information isn't picked up from all over the place. So we're going to be very specific and make it a narrow brush. And the hardness, we're going to make it pretty soft, but maybe not that soft. And the size, again, it's going to be pretty small, maybe 9. We'll start off with 9, that seems okay. And just make sure that you're up here and you're doing all layers. So this way, what edits you make on this layer is actually being picked up from this layer. So let's go ahead and start. So we're going to go ahead and select with the Alt key, Alt Option key on the Mac. I'm going to select around the area, pick up around the lips to get some of that rough edge off. Don't worry, because we're always going to go back and make changes to it, and we're going to just clean up some of that texture that just looks pretty bad. And again, by using this type of brush, we can go in a vertical motion and it still go along, basically along with the grains of the lip and the texture. Okay, so this really didn't take long at all. Just going to do a couple touch-ups here. I'm going to go back to the before and after. There's we have now, and that's what we have. What we started with. Before and after. That looks pretty good. Again, no one's going to look at an image at 118%. You know, something like this, even on a full page ad, maybe 100% at best. So that looks pretty good and natural. So we're going to go ahead and start another layer. And we're going to go fix a couple of the hairs around here. And basically the same thing. Use the healing brush. And we're going to zoom in. I'm going to hit the Z key on the keyboard. And zoom in a little bit. The Z key changes the tool to the magnifying glass. And if you hold the mouse over each tool for a second, it'll tell you what the tool name is. And then if you could see there in the parentheses, it's the key that actually triggers that particular tool. Okay, so back to this, and we're going to go to the healing tool. Basically the same thing. Again, we're going to touch up the area around here, around the lips. We're going to clean up some of that hair. Now we don't want to clean it all up because it is somewhat natural. So we don't want to make it look, we don't want to kill the work we've done now by making the lips look unnatural. But we do want to, again, it is a beauty image, so we do want to clean it up. Get rid of some of that stuff that's bothersome to the eye. Okay, so we just touch up here and there. Maybe change the angle of the brush here a little bit. Because I am using a Wacom tablet, it affords me pressure sensitivity. So the more I push on the pen, the more area I do manage to pick up and clean. Alright, so this is looking pretty good here. Right, we're not going to go overboard for the sake of this tutorial. I'm just going to go ahead and move on. I'm going to zoom out, take an overall look at the image again, see what else we want to address. Okay, we could just go ahead and start addressing some of the eye issue here. We saw. Now in this case, I'd probably go back and do another dodge and burn layer just to soften it up a little bit. I don't think it needs any more touching with the texture, but just a little soften light here. What it will do, it'll again take away some of that shadow and soften the difference between the skin here just under her eye and actually probably her eyelid. So let's go ahead and do another layer. I'm going to hold the Option key, new layer icon, pops up this new layer dialog box. You can just call this under eye. Again, what we were doing earlier with the dodge and burn. Let's go to soft light, fill with soft light. We don't necessarily need to create a clipping mask because the other layer is all the way down there. If we create a clipping mask, that only affects the layer beneath the layer that you just created. We definitely don't want that. So we're going to go ahead and hit the B key for the brush, hit the D key for the default, and when you default it, automatically goes to the foreground is black and the background color is white. So we hit the X key, and when you hit the X key, it changes the palette here, transposes the foreground for the background color. So now that we have this, we've got the under eye soft light layer selected. We're going to go to the brush, do normal, and what we're going to do is we're going to make it a pretty low opacity and pretty low flow, and like we did with the other layers when we were dodging and burning, we're just going to go ahead and build up slowly but surely. Okay, as you can see, there is a noticeable difference. It softened that really strong shadow under her eye, and it's not so bold in your face. It's a little more pleasing to the eye. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little hue and color to her cheeks here, and we're going to do that with a layer adjustment. The solid color layer adjustment here. But before we do that, what we want to do is we want to pick the color that we want to use. So again, with the Alt key, we're going to select a color here and find something that kind of works. And as you move around your brush holding the Alt key and clicking around, you can see that the palette here changes. So let's pick something that we think might work. Click that once and maybe go with a little redder, something subtle. Alright, we can go ahead and OK that. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a solid color. That's the color that we just selected. So obviously it's going to create a full page of your color. We want to select the layer mask and Command I to invert it. So now we've hidden all that color. So now we've got something that we could work with. So we're going to hit the brush key again. We're going to make a pretty large brush, very soft edge, no hardness at all. And we're going to just really lightly tap and show the color that we just selected through a little bit. Just very subtly. I'm going to change the layer mode to color. And not sure if you could see that because it is so subtle, but it is adding a nice little tone to her cheek, little flush color to give her a little life. And you can see that looks pretty good. Zoom out a little bit and you can see here before and after. Very, very subtle. Doesn't need to be blatant and obvious. Okay. Now we could, maybe with this here, we'll select a couple of stray hairs just for an example. Again, the healing brush. Make sure you're on all layers. And we created a new layer to work with. We'll just call it stray hairs. And again, this is not my image, so I'm not going to work on it all that long. Just enough to get you guys, oh sorry, in this case we do want a rounder brush. Just enough to give you guys an idea of what can be done. And we're using the pen pressure sensitivity of the Wacom tablet. And again, the more we press, the more area we cover. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's clean up her eyebrows here a little bit. Now let's touch up her eyes a little bit. So hold on one second. Let's go ahead and select the layers so far. And let's group those. Kind of hide those and get those out of the way a little bit. We'll call this touch up 1. Now with the eyes, we're going to create new eyelashes. And we're going to select a very small brush. Let's go into the brushes palette. Shape dynamics, definitely, because what we want to do is we want to not just create a straight edge but a feathering edge towards the end. And we're going to make it a very small brush, very thin brush. 8 is probably even too much. Let's try 2 here. That should work. Alright, for this we definitely want the opacity to be up a lot higher. Maybe 87, 85, somewhere in that ballpark, and the flow definitely to be up at 100%. And what we're going to do is we're going to just paint in, again, because we're using the Wacom tablet, we can do pressure for thicker and less pressure for thinner. For instance, you can just touch it real slowly, and then we can just press on it a little bit more, and you can see how it's a little thinner for here than it is, say, here the middle part. Of course, we're using a 2-pixel brush, so naturally you're not going to get it to be that thick. But for eyelashes, this would be perfect. So with the Alt key, we want to select colors that have already been used, and we want to just kind of fill in eyelashes here. Not too many, just a few. I'm going back and forth to select colors that are used. So it looks natural. There we go. Okay, so we're going to go in while we have that layer selected. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, something very small. Definitely not what we used last time, maybe even half a pixel. We want to lower the opacity just a little bit. So before and after. Let's zoom out a little bit. Just thickened up the bottom eyelashes just a little bit. Now let's take a look at the overall image. Go back to our help layers, see if there's anything that we missed. We fixed that. We addressed some of that already. Alright, some of the redness in the eyes. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so we'll zoom in. We'll go ahead and hide the help layer. I'm going to create another layer. Call this eyes. Now she's obviously wearing contacts, and they're colored contacts. So we're going to touch up a little bit here around the eyes. We're going to use again the healing brush tool, one of the most versatile tools in the bunch there for skin retouching and editing in general. And then we're going to use an adjustment layer, a hue saturation, just to turn down some of the color in this in the veins, in the pink in the veins. These eyes aren't as bad as I've seen. Every image again is going to be a little different. There's lots of different things we could do. Sometimes they're almost bloodshot, but in this case it really won't require a lot of work. So now that we have the eyes layer created, go back to the healing brush. I'm going to make a very small brush again. I'm going to bring it in close like we did a little bit and reduce the roundness of it. And we're going to go ahead and just heal away. And what we want to do is we want to select from a clean area and use it to obviously fix the area that we want to fix. Now I'm not a big fan of removing all of the veins because we've got them and it's natural, and the key is to make it look natural but just clean up what it is that you are working with. Okay, so now this isn't really bad at all. What I said before is I've seen images even as bad as bloodshot. So what I would normally do here in this case is use a hue saturation layer adjustment and go to the clicking on that icon. There's two ways you could get to the adjustment layers, either up here, I've got the adjustments panel showing obviously, or back down here. You can hue saturation. We definitely don't need two layers. So we're going to drop down to the red layer, and you can see when you drop down to a particular color, it goes to that area in the gamut. So we're going to go red, and basically we're going to spot on a color in that area that we want to reduce a little bit, say like right here, and then just slide it down. Of course it's affecting the entire image and anything below it, so we'll fix that in a second and get it to the point where we're happy enough with it. We're just really focusing in on that area here, and in this case there. This isn't such a bad image to work with as far as the eye is concerned. Some of them are really bad. I'll just lighten it up a little bit. Okay, so obviously since it's the hue saturation, we adjusted the reds, it's going to affect pretty much the entire image. So again, with the layer mask, click on the layer mask, and we're going to hit Command I and invert it. So now you just created a black mask and hid all the stuff that we just worked on. And we're going to go back, and with the white brush, smaller opacity, again we want to build up here, smaller brush, we want to just paint back the adjustments that we made and hide some of the redness in the eye. And you can see, because we basically told Photoshop to just touch the redness of this particular area, the red channel, the red colors. It's directly affecting only the reds. So we just go in there, touch it up a little bit. I don't want to hide them all. And then of course we just go ahead and tweak with the opacity and get it to where we want it. So there you go, before and after. Just hit it a little bit, just enough to make us happy. And let's go ahead and zoom out, Command 0. And I think we're pretty much done with the image. Let's go ahead and remind you that this was not my image, but the image is available for download. The link is below in the description. So download it, sign up for their newsletter. Have at it. I hope you enjoyed these videos, these tutorials, and I'll be posting more on a regular basis. Join me on my Facebook page, facebook.com/954photos, or you can just subscribe to the channel here on YouTube or Vimeo. You can find me under my last name, and I'll be posting more behind the scenes videos of some of my own shoots and more tutorials on a regular basis.